To the January 6th meeting of the Parking and Traffic Safety Committee. I'm City Manager Karen Conard, filling in as temporary, underline the word temporary, chair, until such time as we have a council representative. So first thing we'll do is have the call to order, and I will read roll. Mary Lou McElwain, I believe you're on Zoom.
Yes.
Good morning. Steve Pesci, I also believe you're on Zoom.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Mark Siracusa.
Present.
Harold Whitehouse.
Yes, thank you.
Erica Wygonick.
Here.
Police Captain Mike Maloney.
Here.
Fire Chief Todd Germain.
Here.
Public Works Director Peter Rice.
Here.
And City Manager Karen Conard is here. Thank you, everybody. First up is the financial report, and we'll hear from Ben Fletcher. Good morning, Ben.
Good morning. Let me go ahead and,
Everybody looks at me.
this is a little bit delayed, so hang on a second.
Yeah, I should mention for folks watching at home, we're working with a hotspot for internet, and there may be a minute or so delay as we transition.
Okay, so here's the financial report. The good news is we're at 53% of our budget on the year, and we're only expended 41.67 of the year so far. So it looks like we're doing better than our budgeted goals in almost every category, and we're pretty much right on with the one that is lagging behind. So having a good year so far.
Great. Do we have any questions about the financial
Chairman.
report?
Madam Chairman, I move the financial report to be
Of all Americans said that they already
presented.
Great, thank you. So moved. And do we have a second?
Second.
Great. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is public comment. If you'd like to make a public comment, kindly come up to the microphone and let us know what you're thinking about. Does anyone here present wish to participate in public comment? Come on up. Give us your name kindly and your address.
My name's Lenore Weiss Bronson, 828 Woodbury Avenue, Portsmouth.
What's the name?
Can you please pull the
Lenore,
microphone?
Lenore, Lenore.
Yep.
Can you please pull the microphone over?
Oh,
Thank you.
sorry. Lenore, Lenore.
Oh, yeah.
And I've,
Good
my
morning.
last name is a double name, Weiss, Weiss. Bronson, Bronson.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm here regarding the request of our neighborhood, the Frank Jones Farm neighborhood, for traffic calming measures to be taken, steps to be taken in our neighborhood on and adjacent to Woodbury Avenue. And these are long-standing. The first time I think I came was probably 1995. Excuse me, I just ran here, so and over the years, our neighborhood group has had many meetings regarding the problems on Woodbury, and they were has had many meetings regarding the problems on Woodbury,
Oh.
and
Kevin, if you could hear the feedback, thank you. Go ahead, Lenore.
Yeah, and so we have requested of the city multiple times that stop signs and speed bumps or humps, such as those on Maplewood now, be installed along Woodbury. And I'm not sure, I was told that the request that we submitted for a CIP was reviewed by all of you and put on file or not, or you had chosen not to deal with it at this point. And it's difficult for us to think in terms of it being too soon to deal with what needs to be addressed on Woodbury Avenue. I'll just give you a few, I can give you a copy of our request if you don't have it, but just to tell you a bit of what it's been like to live there since 1986. I understood when I moved there that there would be traffic. There was traffic when I was there. And 15 years ago, there was a traffic count of 57,000 plus vehicles per week coming down Woodbury from, that would be from, say, Rite Aid to Bartlett. And there is no need or no requirement to stop between the light at Granite Street, which is Rite Aid, all the way to the stop sign on Bartlett, which means, which is approximately 3/4 of a mile. It's the only place in Portsmouth, especially in a residential area, that this phenomenon has been allowed to remain for decades. And I'm not sure why, because I came before this commission several times, and one time Ken Smith, who was on the board, called me afterward, after I'd talked as I am now, and said, we've looked into it, and yes, something can be done for stop signs on Woodbury Avenue at various intervals. But nothing ever came of it, and he was no longer on the board shortly thereafter, so it was never followed up on, I guess. Then I went a few years ago again, and actually I have the persons who responded to me by phone in this committee. I still have the recordings because I thought it was important to keep them. And the last one was from Brad Lown, who called and said, yes, your statement was very compelling. We really are going to do something about this. We'll get back to you. Believe me, something will be done. So the other day, just to back up a bit, and I could give you anecdotal accounts from the last 30 years of horrendous accidents and near accidents on Woodbury Avenue, and they've affected me personally. One of which was someone who came around the corner, a car that came around the corner into Farm Lane in front of St. Catherine's Church, which is where I live. And when I was walking out of my house carrying a small dog, and the vehicle came to a screeching halt after having taken out the stop sign about 15 feet from me, and almost hitting the stone wall that is in front of my house. But he was headed directly for me, and he stopped right about as far as we are, like this, not even. And I just froze. I couldn't, I really, he would have killed me. And when I got his license plate. He drove away, didn't speak to me. He could drive his car away. It was damaged. Submitted it for a police report. I know it was followed up on. It was found that he lived in Nottingham and so on, but nothing was done. The stop sign was replaced. But I went to work that day, and I had to teach, and I actually could not. I was so shaken. And it's a culmination of various, for example, seeing a young man and his toddler pushing, and a dog crossing at Farm Lane in Woodbury towards St. Catherine's Church. Someone coming up from 95 and stopping about this far away. He came to a screeching halt because it's an incline. You don't see. There's nothing to indicate there's a crossing there, except painting that fades a lot on the ground, so it wasn't seen. And witnessing this kind of thing and seeing, I mean, there are so many examples. There was a car hit in front of me with an elderly couple, and I was at my kitchen window. I look out onto Farm Lane. The car went flying literally off the ground into my neighbor's retaining wall and just was stuck there, rocking back and forth until the police came. Another time, a woman was walking, an elderly woman, when the church was open for services, was walking across the street in front of my house on the crosswalk, which again has no sign there. So, and she was hit and was lying face down in the stripes there at St. Catherine. She lived, as far as I know. Another time, a woman backing out of her driveway on Woodbury Avenue had to back out, was hit. She was in her 70s or so, Alice, and I went over. I felt responsible. I was to visit her. I was the chair of the neighborhood, and she was a good neighbor. And I went over to see her, and she was sitting on the side of her bed with 2 black eyes and very shaken. And she died a few months later. I don't know. I can't say it was because of that. She had been rather ill anyway. But I've also picked up my neighbor's dog that was killed in front of my house. My dog was hit, not killed. I have more of these accounts, and when I did mention to the police at one point that 2 people were killed on Woodbury Avenue, the officer said, "Oh, I can't believe that." And so I called my neighbor who had told me that, and she lives down near Edmond, and she gave me the names of the 2 people, and one was a 16-year-old boy closer to the New Franklin School Holiday Inn, but on Woodbury, and another more toward the commercial part of Woodbury. The problem, too, now is with all of this incredible building in Portsmouth, we have more traffic, obviously, and the new signage has now really very clearly, coming up from Route 1, the state signage, funnels all of the traffic into our neighborhood. It says, right lane, Woodbury Avenue. It's not commercial Woodbury they're going to, it's residential. So for example, just to give you an example, if you wanted to get to Home Depot you're coming up from Rye, say you're at entering the circle and you're looking toward Dover and you decide, I'd like to go to TJ Maxx or Whole Foods or Home Depot. So you say, oh, they're on Woodbury Avenue. So you get off, you come through our neighborhood, and you take 4 traffic lights to get there. If you were to stay on the circle and go straight, as if you're going to Dover, take Brady Drive, go by the Ford dealership, the various car dealerships, you would stay on Brady Drive, you would pass Home Depot, you would come up to Applebee's on the right, or left into Whole Foods, or straight ahead into Marshall's. It's all right there, and no traffic light, and it would take you approximately 4 minutes from the circle at most. So traffic is actually being diverted into our residential neighborhood. People are taken out of their way if they're looking to go to commercial Woodbury, which I assume they are. None of it makes any sense, and the problem is people's lives are in danger, and there are a lot of people who would be here right now because of the time of day and so forth. It's not always easy for people to come, but also because they've just given up. I'm exhausted. I came here when I was in my 30s. I've been trying to get this problem resolved in a really rational way for years now. And the city and I assume state have come up with various piecemeal solutions. We did get the sidewalks. We're grateful for that on the one side so people can walk. But, this morning, for example, people are waiting with their kids on the corner of Farm and Woodbury for the bus, and other parts of Woodbury, too. They've been there living there a few years, never seen any accidents. I've seen it all, and I see them standing there right where many of these accidents have occurred. Their lives are in danger. On my way here, I saw 3 police crossing guards in the South End, crossing children. None. We have none of that. There's nothing there. I have to just tell you that there are 23 accesses and egresses off of Woodbury between Granite Street and Bartlett Street. You pass New Franklin School, you pass the down ramps from 95, which some people by mistake drive up because of the signage being poor. It's just, and the speeding and the, you don't see people on Woodbury Avenue much now, and nobody uses that new fancy crosswalk with the light on it. I never see anyone use it. Why? Because, first of all, people don't want to be endangered by being on Woodbury Avenue. And this new crosswalk with the light thing goes from one person's house to another. It isn't even at a place where people normally cross. It's not where the school bus stops. I just wish that the people who live there would be listened to finally. And, some have moved away because of it. And, maybe I will too, I don't know. But when I heard at the planning board meeting that our pretty well thought out compilation of requests were just put aside because they're not, it's more important to put sidewalks in Elwyn Park and paint more, bicycle path lines throughout the city. And when I heard of all these other projects that took priority over this, 250 homes, families of people live in this neighborhood and are affected by this. And then we have to also see, and I say congratulations to them, I don't know how they did it, but the people on Echo Ave got their street closed. Now, I've lived here how long? I've never seen a street closed. They got this small street with the least amount of, well, certainly less traffic than Farm Lane or Edmond and some of the other streets, and actually a curve in it, so it does slow the traffic down. Not many residents live on it. I can't figure out what they did to get that closed, but whatever procedure they followed, I would like us to be permitted to follow the same procedure. And I have to say, and it's probably not politically correct to say, but when I asked the traffic engineer why we were being ignored and why we are always told that, it's not a priority, or just sort of piecemeal things are done, he said, well, you don't have political clout, the political clout that the people on Echo had. I don't want political clout. I just want to live in peace and to see my neighbors be able to live in peace, and the people who come after me to live in peace. I really, I feel privileged to live in this city, but this is an acute problem, and if you don't deal with it, I say you collectively or the city or the state or whoever is responsible, I'm going to the governor. I know it sounds crazy, but I don't know where else to go. I was told, if you go to DOT, they'll just send it right back to Portsmouth, and so it'll go in a cycle. And I said, okay, then, it's a question of people's lives being directly affected by neglect, and it's not inexpensive. It's not a costly project. Stop signs, I looked up, I priced them, I wrote it in what we put together here. They're not that expensive. Just those humps that you put in, they put in Maplewood. We can't just have one, because if you put one in this big stretch, people speed up to it, go over it, and speed away from it. There's a lot of speeding and then tailgating. I mean, I don't know. I'm just, as you can see, pretty frustrated, and I thank you for your time. And I just feel like I can't. I've had neighbors say to me, "Just give up. They're not going to do it. They're not." But I look at my computer, and all the letters that we've sent to the city and all the presentations we've made. It's almost laughable if it weren't sad. So I don't know if you can give me some direction about what we can do that is concrete, not put us on file, please. We don't want to be put on file anymore. Thank you.
No, why don't we do this? We'll be glad to take your letter. Director Rice, go ahead.
So we've heard what you said, and just to clarify, this process of coming up with solutions started last fall with the collection of data. There is a project in the CIP that speaks to traffic calming. There are ideas that are being developed to move forward with this. The concern that you've raised has been heard, and it has not been ignored. So
I didn't get any
sorry.
response.
Well,
so.
we weren't interacting with you directly. We were interacting with the committee, received a concern, and it takes time to develop solutions. So it is happening. So I can tell you right now, that process is underway right now. And there is funds identified in the CIP for traffic calming efforts.
But
So
can I just ask why it wasn't on the list then at the planning board meeting?
It
or
wasn't
on the
specifically
presentation?
called out. It was a generic traffic calming. So it's a series of projects. There are a number of streets that have been requesting traffic calming items. So these are things fundings that have been set aside for that. You are in the process of being evaluated. Stop signs have come before this committee a number of times in the past, and they have not been deemed warranted. based on the design standards, and I know you've been frustrated by that, but that has been the committee's decision in the past.
Yes, but, excuse me, they did change it. They did say
I
it
don't want
was,
to do it during
Let's get
public
that.
comment is get
it
into
was
So-
warranted.
So
They said
Lenore
it
and
was.
Peter, we're going to schedule a conversation about Woodbury and other traffic calming projects as we move along in the CIP and understand what can be done in all of these places. So we will properly notice it in an upcoming agenda so that you'll know it'll be on the agenda and you can come and participate in a more full discussion then. So in the meantime, we'd be happy to take your letter.
Okay,
And
well,
keep an
you
eye.
have it, I assume you have it, and you've already, I was told that you put it on file, so,
We'll be happy to take it again. Thank you for being here, Lenore.
thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to provide public comment either in person or on Zoom? Do we have any hands, Kevin or Ben, on
I have
Zoom?
one hand on Zoom.
Go ahead.
It's Robin Russo.
Good morning, Robin. Go ahead.
Good morning. I support my neighbor from Woodbury Ave, and hopefully you get to that finally. She's obviously in distress. That neighborhood is in distress. I didn't know about it till she just talked about it. So hopefully you guys resolve that, and I'll support her situation. I'm chiming in today. I sat in on the sort of breakout committee with your group on the pilot program at Islington Creek. I'd say more people during that meeting were supporting the pilot program than not. It seemed like a few newbies in town were not for some strange reason. But I would say it was an overwhelming success as far as the pilot program, and there needs to be some tweaks to it, and that's fine. But we at the Macintosh building, which is, I live at 90 Fleet Street, it's 8090 Fleet Street, want to be next in line for that resident permit parking program. 55 Congress Street, across from us, 8090 Fleet Street. The new building on Court Street won't have enough parking next to the fire station. Rockingham doesn't have enough spaces, and that isn't even taking into consideration the walk-ups around town over the shops and restaurants. So we need to be next in line. We are taking the brunt of the tourism. We've also paid taxes for 2 garages to accommodate the restaurants and shops, and now it's our turn. It's the residents' turn for a resident permit parking program. I have some ideas. You're welcome to call me. I'm happy to go over that, but we had a meeting in our building this week, and residents are getting on board. We know that that pilot program is ending in February, and we are going to speak loud and clear that we are next. So I'm putting that on the table for your consideration, and we'll be back to speak about it again. If you have an update for me today, that would be helpful. And that's what I have to say. Oh, one more point. Can you have these meetings on a weekday at 7 p.m. when the public can actually attend them? Most people are working at 8 o'clock in the morning or in commute to their job and can't attend this session. So I'm requesting these meetings be moved to a weeknight or a weekend, but probably a weeknight at 7, where most of these city meetings are held, so most people can attend them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Robin. Anyone else wish to provide public comment? See any hands?
Nope, not on Zoom.
Great. We'll move on to new business, and first item under new business is a request for a crosswalk within RRFB just west of the intersection of Islington Street at Vine, with a sample motion to ask staff to investigate usage in the springtime and report back. Does anyone want to speak to this? First, could I get a motion?
So moved.
Yep. Second?
Great. Staff, do you want to mention where this came from?
This was a citizen request, somebody that likes to use the bike trail that is accessed in this area.
So the thought would be, we'll have a better sense of how busy it is when it's
Correct. I would assume that there's a lot more traffic in the spring and summer than there would be now. If we did an assessment of that area now, we probably would not find it would warrant a crossing.
Okay. Any further discussion? Sounds like in order to vote, we're going to take roll calls on everything, so bear with me. The motion is to ask staff to investigate usage in the springtime and report back. Mary Lou McElwain? How do you vote?
Just hang on.
I'll move on to folks who might be in the room. Mark Siracusa?
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse,
Yes.
Erica Wygonik.
I don't think I get to vote.
I think you're right. Police Captain Mike Maloney. Sorry, Erica.
That's okay.
Yes.
Fire Chief Todd Germain.
Yes.
Public Works Director Rice.
Yes.
Mary Lou McElwain, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, I was muted. Sorry.
Thank you. That's okay. Steve Pesci.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. Next item is request for no U-turn sign at Market Street Extension and Nobles Island. Staff, do you want to mention what's going on here?
This was just another citizen request. The picture on the screen shows where the U-turn signs would be located, and I guess it's just up to us to discuss whether or not it's warranted.
Okay. Is there a motion or a discussion that anyone wants to propose?
I guess I'm not quite clear on how bad a problem is this. You know, it's really not something that I've ever had any complaints about, and I just don't, you know, I'm not quite sure if at this time it's warranted. I guess I would, you know, I haven't had a chance to review the MUTCD requirements. I mean, Erica may or Steve may know off the top of their heads when it's appropriate to put no U-turn signs in. But at this point, I would say we monitor and revisit if it's deemed a problem.
Yeah, one. Go ahead, Chairman. One question, Peter. Is any part of that road state-controlled?
No.
No, okay.
So I can add that we do have traffic counts that we regularly take there. It's part of the information we see at PTS every month. So if there is a standard for U-turns on, you know, versus traffic count, we have that piece of data. We could put up a camera and then observe the number of U-turns that are taking place and see if it's necessary.
I would recommend staff research this and report back.
Yep.
Does someone want to make that as a motion? I'll get
make
to you
that as a
for
motion.
discussion. Do we have and you second, Harold?
Yes.
Okay. Discussion, Mark?
Just, is this, you're talking outbound, right?
Yeah.
Going down Market Street Extension,
Correct.
which we've all driven before, and we all decided to say, hey, I don't want to go down, all the way down. And so what happens is someone takes a left to go into Noble Island, and then they go, or they do the illegal turn. You know, so,
Yeah. I mean, I'll often go down Michael Succi and then turn around and go back across.
yeah,
So-
yeah.
Erica?
I don't think there's a warrant for U-turns. I think it's more about a crash history. So I think that's the question. If we are seeing a pattern of crashes here that would be aggravated by this or involve U-turning vehicles, I think that's the concern.
All right, well, the motion is to, you know, staff will
Look into
investigate
it.
and we'll look at the crash history and
Second that, if you're going to move.
Okay, great.
I guess a side note, should I be voting because we don't have a chair right now? Are we down a person?
I would say yes.
We will gladly take you as a voting member.
I'm happy to vote yes to the
Okay.
previous
Okay.
thing. If that's.
Any further discussion?
Do you want me to read these, Chad?
I don't know if they're relevant.
They're the kind of comments just like anybody making a comment
Are
with
they
a
from
hand
the members?
raised.
Are they from the members?
No.
Okay. Mary Lou or Steve, do you have any comments on this one, or are you ready for a vote?
Only a quick comment that I think unless there have been accidents there, and as long as there is the engineering capacity for it, I would think we would want to maintain that flexibility. It is a protected left turn with the signal. So I look forward to the staff report back, but I think if possible, that's good flexibility to keep if it can be maintained safely.
Good, thank you. All right, we'll take a roll call vote on this. Mary Lou McElwain?
Yes, I just wanted to comment that I think it's time for the city to study this further before we make a decision.
Great,
I think that's really what Peter was saying from the get-go.
correct. Thank you. Steve Pesci?
Yes, I approve of the study, further study.
Great, thank you. Mark?
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse?
Yes.
Erica Wygonik?
Yes.
Captain Maloney?
Yes.
Chief Germain?
Yes.
Director Rice?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Item C, request for a four-way stop sign at the intersection of State and Union Streets. Who would like to speak to this?
This is another citizen request. They just believe that it would be beneficial to have a four-way stop here in the area pictured.
I move staff studies it and lets us know.
Second?
Great. So the motion is for staff to study and report back. Is there any discussion on this? Steve or Mary Lou have their hands up. It's hard for me to turn around, Ben.
No?
Okay. All right, we'll take a roll call vote. Mary Lou McElwain,
Yes.
Steve Pesci,
Yes.
Mark Siracusa, Harold Whitehouse,
Yes.
Erica Wygonik,
Yes.
Captain Maloney,
Yes.
Chief Germain,
Yes.
Director Rice,
Yes.
and Chair votes aye.
Mr. Chairman, just one question, please, in reference to that. Will there be a time limit? I mean, I'm talking about when the report back will come.
That's a great question. Staff is a little limited in the resource department, so we'll work to get that as expeditiously as possible. Would be
Yeah, so what we'll be doing is we're working with a contracted a firm right now to provide engineering services, and this would require a warrant evaluation. So we have to first do, some traffic counts and see how so it's going to take a while, Harold.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say a few months.
Few months?
Yep.
Wow. All right.
Next up is a request to add LED accent lighting to the new stop signs that are on Banfield Road already, with a sample motion to approve the signage upgrade. Could I get a motion and a second, then we could discuss?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
the proposal was brought forward by the Department of Public Works, looking at the new stop signs along Banfield Road and some of the crash history at these stop signs. The police have made it clear that there's a lack of awareness of folks going down that section of roadway, and we believe that the LED perimeter lights on the stop signs would help visibility and just make people more aware and help with that transition.
Makes sense. Any other discussion?
And I would also add that the feedback from the police department is that these would certainly be of benefit. The officers are out there every day stopping cars, and there's people running the new stop signs that are clearly visible, and they don't even know why they're being pulled over, and they're running the stop signs in excess of 25, 30 miles an hour. We've had a couple crashes out there, so this would help.
Great. And there are a total of how many stop signs that would get this treatment, Peter?
4.
Got it. Thank you.
So actually, how do they work? So sonar?
No, they're just digital LED lights that flash around the perimeter of the stop sign.
What provides the
The power?
They're solar.
Yeah, they're solar powered. Solar power.
solar? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Erica?
I think there's also an
I
MUTCD
see.
sign about new, like intersection control ahead or something like that, that might be a good idea to put up temporarily to kind of alert people.
Hey, Mike, I'm sorry.
I'm done.
Mike, are those, when they put the stop sign that says new, does your department feel that that's effective and working? Or it says the stop sign, they'll see the word new on it.
They're effective in working in the sense that it's a stop sign that's visible in broad daylight or even under low light conditions with headlights.
Okay.
People have driven that road for 20, 30 years, and they're not paying attention to them.
Right.
So something like this to help draw their attention, I think would be a benefit.
So the word new isn't really working. That's what I'm.
In the instances that we've seen with people being stopped, you could put new, old, or anything on it, and they're not going to see it.
Right. That was the point I was getting at.
So the reason that new is put there, Mark, is so that when people come up to it, they're like, geez, I don't remember that being there, and it's clear that this is new.
Okay.
That's the only reason it's there.
Okay,
It's
so
not, there's not a traffic control element to it, it's just more
So
informational.
emotionally, mentally, they're working, so. that's
It
all
helped
it is.
me.
Okay, there you go.
I
That's
just
all
didn't
wanted
get
to
in
know.
a crash because of it.
That's all I wanted to know. One question.
Mary Lou or Steve, any comments from you?
I just wanted to say I support us introducing these LED signs, both our RFB and the LEDs, but I do really want to encourage us to use them judiciously and to develop some threshold for their appropriate use. Just because of the cost, we know they're effective, but there's cost, and we don't want to have hundreds of these all over town. I'm exaggerating, but I encourage them, but I just want us to be judicious in where we use illuminated signs in general.
Thank you, Steve. And to that end, we are, thinking about that aspect, and really it came down to the police monitoring and that they showing that the signs are being ignored and that there has been a number of accidents. So that was the justification in our mind to add these, not just
Great.
because it was a new and great thing to do. It was just, there was a justification.
I also-
Excellent, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I almost wonder if we could also use them over a kind of medium-term duration. If the issue is that people are just in the muscle memory of not expecting to stop there, maybe we can deploy them for a year or two to kind of retrain people that this is a stop sign, and then potentially redeploy them somewhere else in the city, depending on what we're seeing in terms of crash history.
I would argue against that, in that I would rather have, if we were going to do something temporary, have a separate temporary signage that's very clear that it's not the stop sign.
Yeah.
If you add it to the stop sign, people will get used to it, and then something happens, they would say, well, you had that before, I didn't notice it because it wasn't there.
Not flashing now.
So I think that would be problematic.
Fair point.
Okay. Let's take a roll call vote. Mary Lou McElwain?
I just have a comment before we do this. I had my hand up. Can everybody please put their microphones closer to them? I'm having a hard time hearing every comment.
Sure, will do.
Can you do that, please?
We all will do that.
Yeah. Erica?
She's pretty close.
I think our problem is mask and, yeah.
I'll
Let's
talk
go back.
louder, Mary Lou, because I'm practically kissing mine.
All right, we'll do our best on this end. So we're going to take a roll call vote. Mary Lou?
Yes.
Thank you. Steve Pesci?
Yes.
Mark Siracusa? Harold Whitehouse?
Yes.
Erica?
Yes.
Cat Maloney?
Yes.
Chief Germain?
Yes.
Director Rice?
Yes.
Chair votes aye. Under old business, we have confirmation of the formation of a subcommittee to study the Portsmouth Street inventory and make speed limit recommendations. I believe this was something that Erica and Steve were going to step up and help with. That was discussed at the November 16th PTS meeting. What's the best way to move forward with this item?
So moved.
Are we looking to confirm that this, in fact, will take place?
Yeah. My concern was that we felt like we kind of jammed this through with Steve and Erica, and then it wasn't necessarily something that they volunteered directly to do. We wanted to make it clear that that was something they were interested in participating in. Obviously, staff will support them to provide whatever materials and legwork, but if that's something that they're willing to do. If not, staff can go ahead and do the legwork and do the evaluation and come back with recommendations.
I'll propose a hybrid motion to that. Why doesn't staff come up with something and run it by Erica and Steve to prep it for the committee? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I'm definitely happy to participate, support whatever role you want me to play. I'm happy to play, support
Okay.
this effort. I guess it would help, just thinking about kind of what our plan is. I don't know, do you want to put a plan together? Do you want me to? It feels amorphous right now,
We'll
I
put the plan
guess.
together. As
Yeah.
I think the modified recommendation or motion or whatever we have on the table is appropriate, that the staff will take the lead and we'll report back, and then obviously it'll go before the whole committee as well.
So, Steve, are you comfortable with that?
Yes, I'm happy to participate and look forward to working with the staff and Erica and whoever else might want to be involved. I think it's going to be a process. I think, we'll work together and develop some high-level principles or protocols and work downwards, because it's going to be a big process, and it's going to be impossible to do everything at once. But I look forward to working with the team and addressing some of the inconsistencies that we see. Yes.
So why don't we do this? At the point in time staff has a draft for the subcommittee to review, Erica and Steve can find out if they have any volunteers to join them, and we'll take it from there.
Okay.
So
All right. Go ahead.
procedurally,
Yep.
and I'm not sure, and I guess I'd have to look into this, if we call it a subcommittee, whether it becomes a public meeting, whether it has to be posted, whether it has to be, my thought is that, given the challenges associated with coordinating all the things, it would be better to start
As a working
as a
group?
working group and then report to the committee in a public format, so that people have
Yeah.
the opportunity to see what's been done and what's being recommended.
Good.
And fulfill that public right to know aspect through that. Not that we don't want to, it's just there's a lot of effort.
Administratively, it would be.
Yeah, it would be
Administratively, it's more
hard
burden.
to just like get the work done if we have
Right.
to notice every time we.
I agree, Peter.
So how are you going to word Karen, how are you going to word the motion?
I think the motion will be that staff will work to develop a draft Portsmouth Street inventory, share it with a working group that will then be, and the byproduct of which comes to the full council for consideration, for the full committee for consideration. People comfortable with that? All right, that's my messy motion. Is there a second?
Second?
Great. Any discussion on that? Mary Lou or Steve, you good?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Could I just add one comment too?
Sure.
I did notice that there are at least one, possibly two bills being introduced in the legislature regarding minimum speed limits. So I think part of our task will be to follow that, to keep tabs on that as well and the implications for Portsmouth.
Great. We'll mention that to Jane Farini, who's our Assistant City Attorney and Legislative
Yes.
Watchdog. Thank you. Okay, we'll take a roll call vote on that. Mary Lou?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Harold?
Yes?
Erica?
Yes.
Cat Maloney?
Yes.
Chief Germain?
Yes.
Director Rice?
Yes.
Chair votes aye. Thank you. Next up under old business is a request for RRFB at the intersection of South Street and Broad Street as discussed at the November 16th meeting with the sample motion for staff to place a traffic camera there in the spring of 2022 and report back.
So this is really just informational. There was a topic that was brought up, and there's no motion needed for
Okay.
this.
No motion.
I'd like to make a comment
Sure.
in reference to that. At our last meeting, we talked about a blinking light at the corner of Broad and South. You know, in my opinion, I thought about it afterwards. In my opinion, blinking lights are not effective at all. Was there ever any consideration of a raised pavement in that section coming out of Broad to slow the traffic down? Just a thought, that's all.
No, the issue was not so much speed going through the intersection, it was more visibility of pedestrians going across the side,
I see,
crossing the street.
Okay.
And a speed table really would not address that concern.
Okay,
So
so
that
the
was.
blinking light is not,
And the blinking light was not on the table, it was the RRFB, it was the two pedestrian-actuated setups,
Oh,
the
I
two
see.
signs with
I
the
see,
pedestrian-actuated.
I was mistaken. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Give me a second when we put you up.
Thanks for clearing that up, Peter. Thank you for the question, Harold.
Karen, if
that-
I might add a comment, I did go out, although I wasn't with the group, I think you had a site visit, I did go out and look at that closely myself, and I look forward to the staff report back, but to me, this falls in that category of judicious introduction of these electronic sign enhancements. I'll look forward to the staff results, but my first take on this was, this is a pretty safe crosswalk with a protracted signalized intersection a short block away. So again, the threshold issue, but
Okay. Bear with me. We're having a technical issue. Okay. Thank you, Steve. Next up under informational items, Cat Maloney with the report from the police.
If I may interject for just a second, it was pointed out to me that the November data at the top of this is correct, but it's showing up in the October bar. Actually, the number for October was 64, so that'll be corrected obviously in the next meeting, but the November number is correct at 70, and the captain can speak to it.
And just to point out, we'll correct this for the presentation
posting.
that gets posted online.
Correct.
We'll correct it.
Yeah, correct. So 70 total crashes, 40 of those in the month of November. Reportable crash, again, is a damage in excess of $1,000 property damage. So we're tracking right around average.
Okay. Any questions for the captain? Next up,
Chairman,
go ahead.
I don't know if this would come under informational or miscellaneous, but I'd like to have it brought up in reference to stenciling in the crosswalk. I brought it up twice in previous meetings. You know, I'm thinking about stenciling like a bicycle stencil on the roadway in Middle Street. You know, please look up. That's all I'm saying. They're crossing at Market at Congress and Maplewood Avenue, and they're pushing the button and not even looking up, and traffic is making a right-hand turn. They're crossing at Fleet and Congress, and they're not looking up, they're looking at the computer. You know, I was wondering if that's allowed by state statute to stencil in the crosswalk. Please look up. That's all I'm saying, because it's all over the city. They're just too concerned about looking at their computer, looking down, pressing the button, and not even paying attention.
Ms.
Want to address that?
Chair, yeah, we'll confirm, but based on past research, crosswalks are very specific on what you can and can't do, and adding additional things is not permissive. So it's not
Governed by the state, is it?
It's designed. It's the MUTCD Manual Uniform Traffic Control design. So it's very specific on what you should and shouldn't be doing with crosswalks. So, you know, I appreciate what you're saying, but, you know, it's really not appropriate to add additional information in a crosswalk.
So how do we educate the people to, please, when you press that button for walk, please look up.
Now you're talking about common sense,
Looking
Harold.
down at the computer.
Yeah.
You know? Jesus.
You can't legislate common sense.
No.
I know.
If you
You're
could,
right,
we'd be in
you're
a
right.
different world. Let's move on to bike and vehicular traffic data with, Ben, do you want to speak to this?
Sure. This is the data from Market Street at Nobles Island, and you'll see at the far right, that's our current data. If you compare that to December of last year, we're considerably higher. It looks like we're closer to the 2019 numbers, which is indicative of what we're seeing on South Street as well. This information is from South and Middle, and this was a comparison from 21 to 19, just to look past the COVID year and kind of see where we were pre-COVID. We'll have to decide if we want to continue this graph going forward. Obviously, we're through with the year, and maybe come up with something else that's more relevant in the future.
Okay, great. All right, any questions on that? If not, we will move on to item C, which is a presentation from Sebago Tech. Sebago? I don't want to ruin the company's name. Come on up. That'd be great. We have Derek Caldwell, and we have Tyler Reese. Are you joining, Derek? No. Okay, great. Derek, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Tell us the proper name of your company so I don't botch it again.
Sebago Technics.
Thank you.
Just like the lake.
All right, so Ben will run the slide deck if you want to take us through the Middle Street and Miller Ave and Summer Street traffic signal replacement project.
Thank you. Yep, my name is Derek Caldwell. I'm a traffic engineer with Sebago Technics. We're working as a consultant for the city on the redesign of this intersection. With me, too, is Brad Lyon, who's serving as the project manager for this. So he might chime in after the presentation as well. If you want to jump to the next slide. So real quick, this is just the general purpose and need of the project. The purpose is simply to modernize the existing traffic signal equipment and to increase mobility for all, including vehicles, pedestrians, and bikes. And this is just demonstrated by the obvious age of the infrastructure and the ongoing maintenance issues that the city has been having, as well as the infrastructure just not being compliant with ADA standards. Next slide. So as you all know, the intersection is at Middle Street, Miller Avenue, and Summer, Middle Street being Route 1. I'm going to refer to Middle Street as north and south, and then Miller and Summer east-west. Not sure if that's how everybody else would, but for this presentation, that's how I'll be referring to it. Next slide. So as you all know out there, it's a four-way signalized intersection. Right now it operates as what we call fixed time. There's no detection for vehicles at the intersection, so the signal will run the same timings all day, regardless of vehicle demand. So one thing this project certainly will be doing is installing some detection to make it more traffic responsive. There's existing pedestrian crossings on all approaches. The plan is to maintain all of those and simply just upgrade the curb ramps, replace all the pedestrian infrastructure. Currently, there's no separate bike facilities out there. There are some sharrows painted on Middle Street, and as you'll see when we walk through some of our concept designs at this point, that there is an opportunity to potentially provide some more formal bicycle facilities immediately at the intersection. And finally, there's no emergency vehicle preemption out there today, so the design will certainly be incorporating that equipment as we move forward. Next, please. The next few slides are just a few images that we took this past summer out at the intersection. This is just looking north on Middle Street. As you can see, there's a singular mast arm on the right-hand side there that has 2 signal heads mounted on it, one for each direction on Middle Street, and that the rest of the signal heads at the intersection are mounted on posts on all the corners. You can flip to the next one. This is just looking south. You can see one of the Sharrows out there. Again, one overhead signal, and then also a post-mounted signal on the near side of the intersection on the right side. Next. And again, just looking down Summer. The Summer and the Miller Avenue approaches don't have any overhead signals, just the post-mounted. Traditionally with designs, we prefer to have the overhead. It just enhances visibility to have them out over the middle of the intersection so vehicles can see them more clearly. Next. And that's just looking from Miller Ave. A little hard to see this slide from here, but this is the design traffic volumes that we were using as we walk through our alternatives. This is based on traffic counts that were collected. I believe it was this past summer, and then we adjusted for a few different factors. First, we adjusted for COVID, that graph that you just had up actually. We used some data to adjust up from 2021 to what we think would be if we ever recover fully from the pandemic. We also adjusted for seasonality using some of the continuous count data that the city also has at nearby intersections. And then finally, we adjusted to a future 10-year build-out of 2032. So as you can see, as would be expected, Middle Street is the major movement. Out of all the singular movements at the intersection, Middle Street northbound has the highest volume, ranging from about 380 cars to just over 400. I actually can't see this clearly myself right now, so, yeah, 466, about 470. And then of note, though, is the Middle Street southbound movement, the number of lefts ranging from 100 to about 125, depending on the peak hour. I should say that the upper left-hand corner there is the AM peak hour, the upper right is the PM peak hour, and then the lower left is the Saturday peak hour. Miller Avenue also has a pretty heavy right turn movement compared to the other movements at the intersection. So that's that left turn southbound on Miller opposing the northbound movements, or sorry, the southbound left turn on Middle opposing the northbound through on Middle kind of becomes the critical design volumes that we're working with. Next, please. So here's just a quick overview. On the next slides, we'll actually have images of this that will do a better job. We've come up with 2 alternatives at this point. The first essentially maintains the existing lane configuration, so a single lane on each approach at the intersection. The one change, though, is with the new signal equipment that we would implement what's called protected permissive phasing for the Middle Street southbound. So there would be a left turn green arrow up there that would come up to provide that southbound protected left from Middle to Miller. One other thing that this alternative could do is pull in some curb lines to create some shorter pedestrian crossings and define bike lanes. And again, you'll see this on the next few slides. And then real quick, the next alternative is to provide dedicated left turn lanes on both the Middle Street approaches. And to note overall, with both of these alternatives, all the signal equipment would be replaced at the intersection. So all the cabinet, the signal controller itself, all detection, and the signal structures would be replaced, and that all the curb ramps would also be reconstructed to meet current ADA compliance. And also the exclusive pedestrian phase would be maintained. I think that might go in line with some of the concern I heard along Maplewood as far as the right-hand turns when the pedestrians are walking. So our plan would be to maintain what's out there today. When a pedestrian pushes the button, all 4 crosswalks go at the same time. Next, please. So this is the alternative 1 plan. You can see, like I mentioned, there's 1 lane for each direction. Miller and Summer Avenue essentially would not be touched as far as the lane configuration goes. Middle Street, you can see that this is showing the curb lines pulled in a little bit. That darkened curb, it's pretty hard to see the existing curb lines on this plan, but those dark curb lines are a couple feet closer into the intersection. And the reason we did that was essentially that if we're going to, with this alternative, if we're going to keep only 1 lane in each direction, there's the lane widths are actually pretty wide out there today, so there's some excess space on the shoulders. So rather than just leaving that larger than it needs to be, if you pull the curb lines in, you get that defined bike lane, as well as shortening the pedestrian crossings. Might just be an opportunity to increase some safety for pedestrians and bikes. So in this one, like I said, the plan would be for Middle Street southbound, so on the right side of the screen coming down. On the new mast arm, you'd have a signal head that would provide a protected left turn to Miller Avenue. Now, the one concern with this configuration is that you don't have a defined left turn lane for that approach, so that protected phase would have to come up at all times. Could be programmed so certain times of day it wouldn't, but if it needs to be on, then it would need to come up each cycle. One benefit of this plan, too, the way it's laid out now, is that the majority of on-street parking in the area could potentially remain. Next slide, please. So this is referring to the second alternative. You can see that we have shown striped out dedicated left turn lanes on Middle Street, northbound and southbound. The curb lines in this would stay the same. There is actually enough pavement out there to squeeze in the 3-lane cross section, as well as some form of bike lanes. That does come at the expense of on-street parking. And I have a later slide that details out a little bit more. So the benefit of a plan like this is that we provide that protected permitted phasing for Middle Street southbound to Miller Avenue, but the vehicles would have a dedicated left turn lane to queue up in. That does two things. Obviously, it just enhances safety, that those vehicles are removed from the through traffic, but it also operationally makes the intersection more efficient in that protected left turn would only be called up if there is a vehicle actually waiting there to be turned. And the reason we also provided a dedicated left turn lane on Middle Street northbound, even though that left turn lane this summer is not particularly high volume, if we go this route and we do provide that turn lane on southbound, we have to mirror it in some fashion on northbound, so rather than just having dead space, might as well take advantage of it and provide the left turn lane there as well. Next slide. So this table details the capacity analysis we did, vehicle capacity analysis of the different alternatives. We do this using the SimTraffic traffic simulation models. So this takes those design volumes that I showed. We have some proposed signal timings that I don't have detailed here, but certainly as we move with the design plans, it will. And it outlines the projected delay, which is measured in seconds per vehicle, corresponding to a level of service. For those of you who don't know, level of service is measured from A to F, just like grades, with A being the best, F being failing, and E also being generally unacceptable. So you can see the columns are set up that the first two are the PM peak hour and the next two are the Saturday peak hour. And I highlighted some key differences here. You can see it really comes down to that Middle Street northbound approach having the biggest impact. Under the alternative, where there's not dedicated left turn lanes, that northbound approach would suffer since the southbound left turn phase would come up every time, if that makes sense. So whether or not there's a vehicle making left on southbound Middle to Miller, that left arrow would come up, hence holding up northbound traffic. So that's why the second alternative, you see better movement there and less delay. One thing too, as we're walking through this, I should note, for that alternative one, we do show the curb lines pulled in, and I know the way it's configured today, there is enough pavement width that people are able to bypass a vehicle that's waiting to turn left on southbound. So depending how it's laid out, that ability to bypass might be lost unless the vehicle is actually waiting in the intersection. So these results attempt to take account for that, but it's just something to keep in mind that even though there's not a formal left turn lane out there today, the pavement width is wide enough that people do have the ability to bypass. And just on my few times driving through, it certainly seems to be the normal operation. Next slide. So this is just a quick summary of the number of on-street parking spaces I mentioned. So under alternative one, where we'd be keeping a single lane in each direction, we counted preliminarily about 20 spaces available on street south of the intersection within that plan area. and then 7 to the north for a total of 27. Under alternative 2, where we wouldn't be widening the curb lines, but we would be widening the vehicle travelway, it would put a dent in the parking spaces to the south of the intersection to 6, to the north would be about 4. So there's some difference. And again, this would be more detailed once we, selected our path and really got into the detailed design. But just to give you a kind of a sense of level that there could be a chance that on-street parking would be lost depending on which route we go. And with that, be glad to take any questions or more discussion on it.
So just one quick clarification. This is the start of a public discussion. This isn't something that people, it's not going to be set in stone today. We wanted to bring this to the committee, and then we're planning on having public input session so that there'll be further discussion. And at the end of that, we'll come back to the committee with our recommended, but we did want to get kind of a feel from the committee so that, it wasn't something that was just, that you were aware and this is what was being discussed.
I have, go ahead, Harold.
Just one question. In reference to ADA requirements, is there, in the curb cuts, is there going to be another change in reference to that type of curb cut for ADA requirements?
You mean?
Right now, there's a mat put down with knobs in the mat.
Yeah.
Some people are complaining about that, especially during the icy weather.
Yeah.
It's very slippery.
So the knobs, the panels you refer to are required. Now, the actual material of them, we would certainly, as we move forward, I don't know what the city is preferring at the moment, but that is something.
Cast iron is.
They are required, but there are different materials, so there are options. But there will be something out there, but the intent certainly would I know if they're plastic, they can be more slippery than others.
Right. Well,
And just to clarify, the reason they're required is for people who are blind, they know they're entering
Yeah, I
in the
see,
path of
I see,
traffic.
yeah.
So otherwise, they don't have a sense that they're entering into that. So
right.
that's why they're kind of raised
there
and
is some criticism in reference to it.
Yeah.
understood.
They're very slippery on certain conditions.
The best thing we can do with that is trying to steepen the slopes as best we can while staying ADA compliant to make sure water runs and gets out of the area. Sometimes when those are too flat, especially in the winter, that tends to freeze and be problematic. So we'll certainly look at that.
Erica?
Steve and Mary Lou had their hands up, so I was going to let them.
All right, Mary Lou, go ahead.
Yes, this is a long time coming. I've commented on this many times in the years that I've been on this committee. And it's very unsafe and it really needs major changes here. Just 2 comments that the no turn on red signs continue. Those are not, wouldn't be discontinued there. And I'm concerned about eliminating any parking spaces. I want to look at that very carefully. So thank you.
Of course. Steve?
Thank you for a very concise presentation. A quick question. Is there a possibility of a hybrid that would allow the Middle Street southbound to have a dedicated left turn only? I'm just curious. You don't have to answer it now, but that's the one thing that struck my mind, that, alternative 2 seems like it doesn't quite fit the neighborhood. And I'll leave that, but I also want to just point out that I think it's very important that we look at not just the level of service, which you've documented really well, but the importance of the pedestrian safety enhancement of alternative 1, which has shorter crosswalk lengths. So I think that needs to be given equal status. Looks very good, and I look forward to further evaluations of the alternatives.
I can touch on the turn lane just real quick. I think I mentioned it briefly, but like you said, certainly, so if we provide the left turn lane for southbound, we'd have to mirror in some fashion on the northbound side. So you'd end up with some sort of painted island there.
Okay.
Now, if it's not a formal turn lane, that could be shorter and it could be tapered in quickly. So that is something we could certainly look at to see how much we can minimize it.
I thought that's what you would say. So thank you. I guess I feel that alternative 1 at this point looks like a much better fit, but thank you.
Erica?
I echo a lot of what Steve just said. I do think that it'll be great to get the signal upgraded and redesigned. I don't love when we have a protected permitted phasing without the extra lane. That's really tricky, but I think it would be great to try and kind of look into some sort of hybrid. I know we'd have to have some sort of taper there, but I think we could be quite a bit shorter. We could save quite a bit of parking. And I echo what Steve had to say in terms of the bike ped infrastructure here is really important. And if anything we can do to kind of narrow those crossings, I think would help a lot. There is a lot of pavement out there now, but also, you know, the Middle Street bike lanes, everyone loves to talk about those, but I think that transition in this area is part of what has made them pretty tricky. So being able to improve this intersection to help facilitate that, I think is something that is a really important factor of this particular project. So I think that hybrid maybe, depending on what's possible there, seems like potentially a good idea. The other thing I did want to point out that the level of service we're looking at is 10 years out, right? And I don't know what sort of growth rate you guys used, but from my perspective, I'm going to assume you used a 1% growth rate?
Yes.
Something like that?
1% annually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a lot of growth.
Yep.
It tends to be pretty aggressive. And so looking at the level of service results that you shared, even for the alternative one, I thought those are quite reasonable given that amount of growth and the environment that, it's a pretty urban environment. So I think a level of service D into E is not a terrible thing.
And it's peak, those are peak hours too, so it's important to keep that in mind.
Okay, so the follow-on to this will be that there'll be a public info session coming up? Okay.
When does that start, Peter? Public?
When does the public start?
Yeah, the public input sessions.
Well, we haven't had it yet, so we need to schedule it.
Okay.
So there's no formal schedule at this point.
Okay. I'm just gonna ask the city, it's always advantageous, because there's, like Mary Lou alluded to, it's important to communicate to the butters, because there are parking spots in question here, and that's 27. That means there's residential and commercial properties that will be impacted to, maybe put out some notices to them.
Well, your point's well taken, Mark, and this is just the start of that discussion, and, we've learned from past experiences that we don't make changes without informing the abutting properties. So it'll be taken care of.
Great. Yep,
Just
go
one
ahead.
question, please. I thought I knew all the streets in the city, but I don't know where the Lincoln Street is. I know Lincoln Avenue, but I don't know Lincoln Street off Cass Street. Is there a Lincoln
It's just a
Street?
typo.
It's probably
I think it was supposed to be Avenue.
It's probably a typo.
What?
Great catch.
Oh,
It's probably a typo.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you. All right.
where did I have that?
Sorry about
I was
that.
wondering if I was losing it a little bit. Huh?
Is that Exeter, Lincoln Street?
There is-
I just have one question, it might be for staff. When was the last time this intersection was
There's no
comprehensively studied or overhauled, or how long has this equipment and this phasing been in place?
Probably 15 years ago, we made an effort to do something like this. We had issues with easements, and were unable to move forward. However, we've resolved that issue. There was some work done, I believe, 12 years ago. That new mast arm was added. But a comprehensive review, this is really it's been a while, 10-plus years since it's been reviewed, and there's been some market changes in terms of complete street concepts and other things that the city's goals have evolved. So,
Hey, Mike, has the department seen an increase over the years, and because of the flow of traffic has increased over the years in Portsmouth, has there been an increase substantially at that intersection in accidents?
No.
I mean, no.
Mary Lou, I understand you have your hand up.
Yes, just two comments. That there are bus stops on the north and south sides of Middle. And also, I think the consideration for emergency vehicles is very important, because we have the Housing Authority building close by, and emergency vehicles go there frequently.
Great. So we'll be sure to notice far and wide the public information and input session that we will be holding.
Can I make one more comment?
Sure, go ahead.
If we do pull the curbs in at all, I would love to see if we could do that in a way that kind of biases towards better alignment of Miller and Summer. I think we could kind of pull more in on one side and less on the other and get that
Yeah,
a little bit better?
they're offset, but try as much as we can with that.
Great. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
All right.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
We'll see you again at the public
All right.
information
Take
session.
care. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next up will be the Bartlett Street Public Meeting Review presentation by City Staff Engineer Tyler Reese. Welcome, Tyler.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, PTS. So on December 9th, city staff held a public input session with residents of the Bartlett Street area in regards to planned improvements that will be going on in the near future regarding Bartlett Street. Next slide, please. So as a project overview, Bartlett Street is in need of full roadway reconstruction. The pavement is currently in poor condition. It also needs replacement of all underground utilities, drainage, water, and sewer. So currently in our schedule, we are in our fact-finding and data collection stage where we're trying to seek community input. This will give way to preliminary design, final design, bid documents, and then construction. Next slide, please. So we are currently seeking input from the Parking, Traffic, and Safety Committee. As you can see, we have been trying to gather input from various facets of the community. Next slide, please. So existing conditions, we've all been down Bartlett Street. There are substandard pedestrian crosswalks. There are substandard sidewalks. The pavement is in relatively poor condition. These improvements seek to improve this. Next slide, please. Also, the speed on Bartlett Street, this is from August of 2020. The 85th percentile is 29, and the average is 25, which is north of the posted speed limit of 20. So this project will also seek to bring that down more in line with the posted speed limit. Next slide, please. Existing conditions on Thornton Street. The pavement in Thornton Street is in fair condition. However, the lane widths are fairly wide, which, although it is a short street, can lead to faster travel speeds than necessary. Narrowing these lane widths, which you will see in the upcoming plans, will also help to hopefully reduce speeds through the Thornton-Bartlett intersection. Next slide, please. Morning Street is a fairly quiet, low-volume, low-speed street, but the pavement, again, is in poor condition, so it will be resurfaced as part of this project. Next slide, please. So 3 potential layouts have been drawn up based on existing city streets. We brought these to the public and allowed them to comment on it. It should be noted that these 3 layouts only exist from the Thornton-Bartlett intersection to the Woodbury-Bartlett intersection. The section going down the hill will be, we have further constraints there, and that will remain largely unchanged. Next slide, please. So alternate 1 is similar to as Dennett Street appears currently. It involves 2 marked lanes as well as parking on either side of the road. It is important to note that this is how Bartlett Street exists currently in its current form. So this would be more of a no-build option. Next slide, please. This is just a plan view of alternate 1 with the 2 travel lanes and 2 lanes of parking. Next slide, please. And this is just a profile view of that option. Alternate 2 is similar to how Aldridge Road exists currently. It has 2 designated lanes of travel as well as parking on one side of the street. This would mean a reduction in parking on one side of the street as from how Bartlett currently exists. Next slide, please. This is just a plan view of that with parking on one side of the street as opposed to both. And this is a, next slide, please. This is a profile view. As you can see, the travel lanes are slightly wider. Reducing parking on one side would obviously leave more room for greenery and sidewalks in the corridor. Next slide, please. Alternate 3 is more of an alternate yield kind of street where vehicles need to yield to traffic coming at them. This is similar to Cass Street and Lincoln Street as it exists right now. This style of street has been shown to slow traffic speeds and would hopefully also have the effect of pushing more traffic to use the Kate Street extension to the Route 1 bypass, as Bartlett is now currently a thoroughfare to get to the circle. Next slide, please. This is a plan view of alternate 3. As you can see, there are no defined lanes, and there is parking on both sides of the street. Next slide, please. And this is just a profile indicating there will be 16 feet of shared travelway for both north and southbound lanes. Next slide, please. Lower Bartlett Street, as I mentioned earlier, will remain largely unchanged due to geography constraints. However, there will be an addition of a sidewalk on the eastern side of Bartlett Street, which is the auto shop side going up the hill. Next slide, please. Thornton Street will also remain largely unchanged with the addition of delineated parking on one side of the street. This will help narrow the street. As I said earlier, the lanes are currently quite wide, which leads to higher traffic speeds than necessary, as well as higher traffic speeds through that intersection. Next slide, please. This is just a profile view of Thornton Street as we proposed. Morning Street will remain largely unchanged. It is a low-speed, low-volume street that is really just in need of underground utilities and resurfacement at the moment. Next slide, please. So we solicited a good amount of public comments at our meeting. Morning Street residents do not feel that sidewalks are necessary on their street. As we mentioned earlier, it's a low-speed, low-volume street, and they do not feel that sidewalks would be beneficial to them. That was something that was brought up on our end. They have concerns about the effect that that may have on parking. Additionally, there is a large interest in lowering traffic volumes and speed on Bartlett Street. Now that the Kate Street to the bypass is fully implemented, it would be beneficial to direct as much traffic as possible onto Route 1 that way. So lowering traffic speeds and volume are a big priority with this reconstruction. There has been a large interest in more trees and greenery along the corridor, and there's also a general interest in sidewalk improvements along Bartlett Street, as well as overall pedestrian improvements, including RFBs and more visible crosswalks. So alternate 3, if you haven't already figured out, was the most preferred option over the other options. It would very much likely be the most effective at limiting speeds due to the yield alternating traffic method and discouraging the use of Bartlett altogether by people who would therefore find it easier to just go to Kate Street and get on Route 1 on the bypass. However, there were valid concerns about using this method of road design on a road with this high of volumes. Bartlett Street is a heavily trafficked road, so there were significant concerns about, while this is a preferable idea, if it would work correctly in this case, that we had concerns involving coast buses, because there is a stop on Bartlett Street, so they would have to navigate this alternate yield street, and that may be difficult for them. I'm sure Chief Germain, you have comments, then we will get to that in the future about fire access on a yield street. So next slide, please. At this point, we are open to welcoming up to questions and discussion. I know Steve and Mary Lou, you attended the meeting, so I'm sure you have some stuff to add. We would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tyler. You want to stop sharing so we can see the folks? Great presentation.
Thank you.
Any comments? I did not attend the public meeting, but Steve and Mary Lou did?
Yes, Steve and Mary Lou were in attendance.
Go ahead, Steve. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Tyler. And I think the meeting was the public meeting was very well run and got a lot of great comments. Glad to see this moving forward. I have 2 quick questions. I think maybe one of these is a repeat, but I wanted to encourage that if we had any 2021 volume or speed data that would be post opening of Hodgson Way, that would be important for consideration. I think we all know that the volumes have dropped a little bit on Bartlett, which is great, but I want to make sure that we're all grounded in reality. I still think it is an important arterial street and will remain that even with Hodgson being open. And to my point, I guess my bias is I know people are very positively received alternative 3 conceptually, but I think professionally, my opinion is that it is not workable given the function of the street and the volume of traffic that exists. So hence why I would really like to see some 2021 data if we have it. Just note, I brought this up before, but there's 2 transit systems that use that, Carter Coast and Wildcat Transit, and there are a series of stops. So we do have even with the departure of large commercial vehicles, we have bus traffic on there. And I wanted to ask, are the plans, I know you said you were going to post them, but where are we with the status of full format plans being posted for people to physically look at, view, and comment? Are those up at Public Works or City Hall at this point?
Peter, do you know if they're posted?
They would not be posted at City Hall. They would be at Public Works, and we'll make sure they're on the website. If they aren't already, we'll get them on.
Okay.
I would be surprised if they're not on already, but I'll confirm.
Because I think it's important, especially when thinking of the alternatives, that people see the 3 sketches side by side with the lane widths and the sidewalks. You know, when you see them independently, it's not the same effect as when you see them together. So good job. I look forward to this continuing. But I just want to make sure we're looking at some current data post Hodgson Way. Thank you.
Got it. Mary Lou, have her hand up. Mary Lou, do you want to add anything to that?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Harold? Erica?
How many people are parking on street on Bartlett right now? Do we have a sense of?
Quite a
how-
few.
Is
I don't
it
have a number,
enough
but it is a very congested street from that standpoint.
Okay, because the yield isn't going to work if there's not actually enough on-street parking demand to make that happen, you know?
Right.
Yes, that's true.
That there's enough for that, because I guess when I've gone and looking at the photos, it doesn't seem like it's enough use, but
That's a good point. We'll have to, we'll have to put up some traffic cameras and just confirm that
To
it's a
check.
consistent use. I believe there's quite a bit of use of on-street parking.
okay, awesome.
Anecdotally, I would agree. I'm going to put the captain and the chief on the spot. What is your opinion here? And chief, you have bigger vehicles. I guess you'd want to weigh in.
Option 3 is less desirable from our perspective. And I'm using Cass Street, which I live on, as an example. It's hard to get vehicles down in there, especially in the wintertime. We make it work, but if option 3 becomes the desired design, then we'll work with engineers to try to get some concessions so that we can get it a little wider and make it work. And again, a lot of it depends on the parking inventory.
Okay.
If there's not a lot on there, it's not a big issue, but if it becomes that way, then, it does get tight. But, that being said, it's not an often traveled route for us, emergency-wise. Not to say that emergencies don't occur on that street and, distal to that, but there are other ways to get there that are quicker already than going through Bartlett Street.
Got it. Captain, you want to add anything?
I would agree when I saw option 3 for the first time that wasn't my first option because of the volume. Option 3 works well on Lincoln because there's relatively low volume. Option 3 works not as good on Cass because there's more volume. I think this is probably more volume than Cass. So for those reasons the same, I think I'd prefer to stay away from option 3 because of the volume that we're seeing on that road and because we see how it works. I think the Lincoln Cass is a good example because Lincoln, it works well because it's quiet and there's less traffic.
Right.
Cass, we all know what that's like, Chief in particular. So I'd be a little cautious of that.
Peter, do you want to add anything before
Yeah,
we wrap?
just to remind everybody, this is the start of a discussion. One aspect that we didn't look at or didn't discuss at this point, and we haven't really evaluated, is the possibility of improving intersection safety along that area by potentially creating one-way streets. There's a couple of streets that are particularly dangerous coming out onto Bartlett Street, and there may be a potential benefit if we have a one-way, look at creating a one-way street in certain spots. Obviously, before doing anything like that, we would vet that through this committee, and we would go to the public and explain why we felt that was a good option to improve safety. But I concur with the challenges that people have pointed out. The difficulty that I see is the aspirations of the neighborhood are to create wider sidewalks, more amenities along that space, and given the width of the roadway and alternative 3 is the only way to accommodate those types of of things. So I agree 100% that it's probably not a great alternative to take a highly traveled road and really choke it down to the point where you create a yield condition. But we can look at the traffic data. Steve had a good point. We have a little bit of data right from after the Hodgson Way was opened. I think it'd be appropriate to continue to some data collection, and we need to have a serious discussion about this and really look at the functionality. We could potentially pilot something in there by creating some narrowed space and just see how it works. Run emergency vehicles through there and make sure it functions before anything as drastic as Alternative 3 happened. So I think this is really good feedback, and we look forward to continuing the process.
Steve, I know you have your hand up, and then I'll go to Erica.
Just one point I forgot. There was a really great, I think, consensus at the meeting that's worth noting is a lot of people brought up the possible opportunity for a Pine Street, Bartlett Street enhancement of the pedestrian crossing near the playground, whether that would be a three-way stop or whatnot. So I think that's something that's worth keeping on the table, is people seem to all have a consensus that Pine and Bartlett offered an opportunity for some safety enhancement / traffic calming point.
Great, thank you. Erica?
Two things I wanted to note, and this is just based on these designs. I know they're early designs. It looks like the total pavement is pretty similar between Alternative 2 and Alternative 3, and so I think that gives us some flexibility in terms of how much parking demand there is, can kind of dictate which of those two would be needed. And I think if we tried Alternative 3 and it just wasn't working because there just was too much traffic, I think it wouldn't be too hard to roll back to Alternative 2. I mean, the crowning might be a little bit different, but I don't think that's, it is what it is. One question I had, though, is that it looks like all three alternatives, and again, this might be more a factor of just where we are in the design process, but 2 and 3, we've lost 4 feet of pavement, but the sidewalks appear to be 5 feet in all the alternatives. I'm wondering what, we have that extra 4 feet, presumably. What's the vision? Would we do a wider sidewalk? Would we do a green space? I feel like a planted green space might really help this road, but I just wanted to ask about that.
I think a combination of both. You're correct. These are rough. They weren't near final designs. They weren't really fleshed out completely. It was more just an opportunity to get a general feel for, what's the appetite for these various alternatives. And obviously, the balance of a 6-foot sidewalk is really a minimum from our standpoint. And then, the additional green space is something we'd like to have, green strips so that you can plant trees and you can have a buffer.
Yeah.
Harold?
Yeah. I've been around here since dirt, and, this city was laid out for the horse and buggy days. So these professionals that are coming in and making changes, they ought to be considered. That, it's maybe we can't compete with larger cities or larger areas, so they should take that all into perspective. It's a small city. They come here for the historical part of it, and it's still like I said before, it was laid out in the horse and buggy days, and why make any changes? Sometimes it's not practical. That's how I feel.
Thank you. Peter and Tyler, what are the next steps on this?
We'll take this information, come back and flesh out the alternatives a little bit more, and then come back for, we'll do an additional public presentation, and we could potentially make it a committee public presentation, and so that, committee members who are available could attend. We could get feedback from the general public and just of a more fleshed out alternative. Got it. So we anticipate that probably towards April, I would think.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Tyler. Our last item is a Borthwick update, and I can read from it, but Peter, do you want to speak to it? I will read that East Coast Signal will be on site at the intersection of Borthwick and Route 1 bypass. Did that take place around the Christmas time to install wiring?
They were out there, and so now the mast arm installation is scheduled, I think, for next week.
Okay, great. Under miscellaneous, we have a letter from Liz Bratter relative to the neighborhood parking program. Can I get a motion to place that on file?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, second.
Thank you.
Second,
All right, do I have to do a roll call for that? I think I do. Mary Lou?
yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Harold?
Yes.
Erica?
Yep.
Cat Maloney?
Yes.
Chief Jermaine?
Yes.
Director Rice?
Yes.
Chair votes yes.
Have we got a copy of that letter?
It is the last page in your packet.
Packet.
Okay, no, I don't want it.
So at the next meeting, we will undoubtedly have a council rep who will most likely serve as chair, and it remains to be seen whether that chair would like to hold at the normal time of first Thursday at 8 o'clock, but we'll stay in touch with the committee on that, so.
Should we assume that the next meeting is first Thursday at 8?
I would assume that for scheduling purposes, and then we'll,
Madam Chair,
Yes.
one miscellaneous item that, kind of a foreshadowing of the next meeting. We did receive some feedback from a resident on the corner of Union and Austin relative to the challenges, especially during the wintertime, of the width of the roadway down there, and requests to eliminate parking. So this is something we've reviewed in the past. However, we'll bring it back at the February meeting for further consideration. That, just a heads up in terms of the
it'll
next.
be under new business.
That'll
at
be
the
under
next
new
meeting.
business, correct.
Great. Could I please have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Also, Peter,